So the very first topic which I would like to discuss from the perspective of our language is something called a variable. Now, if you have worked in another programming language, you probably are familiar with what variable is. But for those of you who are learning a programming language for the very first time, variable is something like a placeholder, or you can say something where you can store a value or an object. So if I want to have a variable in my R program, I can define one. And the way I can define a variable is, for example, you can have x, which is a variable, and you can assign a value to this variable. So for assigning a value to this variable, we can introduce an assignment operator, and then we can write down the value which we want to save in the variable. So by this statement we mean that we have a variable x and we want to assign this variable a value, and the value is 30. So now when you execute this statement, basically R will assign a value to this variable, and the way you can display your output in the console area of RStudio is that you can write the variable. You can just write the variable in the next statement, and when you execute these two statements, the first will assign the value to the variable and the next one will output the value of the variable in your console area. And in this way you can basically come to know that if you have been able to successfully assign a value to the variable. So I'll quickly run these two lines, these two statements, and the way you can run your statements in R is that, for example, if you just want to run one statement, you can either select this statement or you can just leave it as it is, because your cursor is pointing to the statement 1. When you'll press the run button, it will only execute the first statement because the cursor is pointing to the first statement. But if you want to execute multiple statements, you can basically highlight both the two statements and then run, and once you run, it will execute both the statements. So if I press run, it has executed both the statements, and in the console we can see that the first statement has been echoed out and the second statement has been echoed out, but it has also shown us the output, which is the value of x, and we can see that x has been assigned a value of 30. So that all looks very good so far. Now there's another way of assigning values to a variable in R, and that is by using a function. Now I don't want to go too much in depth as far as the functions are concerned. I'll cover that in the later videos, but you can think of functions as something which can take some input and then do some processing and then give us an output or some kind of a result. Now R has got some built-in functions. We can use those built-in functions, although we don't know how the actual implementation or the internal working of those functions, but we can use those built-in functions, and we can basically have some kind of an output. So one of those built-in functions is assign, and assign can take two parameters. One is a variable. So let's say we have a variable with a name of y, and then we can simply specify a value which we want to assign to this variable. And now if we want to output this variable, we would be able to see the output which we want to have. So over here we can see that a value has been assigned to variable y, and we can see that when we are trying to output y, it gives us the right value which we have specified in the first instance. So right now you can see that we have two variables. One is x and the other one is y, but in our actual programs we would like to have more meaningful names, and we would also like to follow some of the naming guidelines for naming our variables. So for example, there are certain rules which you have to follow while naming the variable names, and there are some certain considerations which you have to think about. So you need to understand that in our language there are certain reserved words which you cannot use as variable names. So these reserved words are words like for, or if, or break, or true, or false. Those kind of names are basically, those kind of words are reserved words in R. And the reason why these are reserved words, because they have a certain meaning within the context of our language. So you cannot name your variables any of these reserved words. There's a long list of these reserved words, but this is just an example. And what all of these elements do in our language, I'll cover all of this in the later video. But for now, you just need to understand that you cannot name any of the reserved words or any of the words which have a certain meaning in the context of our language as your variable names. And other than that, there's not much restriction. There are certain rules about variables, so you can have a number in your variable name, you can have a character in your variable name, you can have an underscore or a dot in your variable name. A variable name can start with a dot, which is a valid variable name, but a variable name cannot start with a dot followed by a number. So you can have something like this: student name is equal to, I don't know, just right there. So that seems to be a legitimate variable name, student name. But if you have something like student1.name, that is not allowed in R. So let me just try to run this statement and let's see what happens. And it says unexpected symbol in .student.1 student name, and you can see that R has straight away complained about this variable name. But if we do something like this, then R will accept this as a legitimate variable name.